Not all paths begin the same way. Some begin with the feeling that you are out of place, even when everything looks right on the surface. From an early age, you sense that you see deeper, hear quieter, and carry more than what is expected of you. The world calls this strangeness. God calls it preparation. This is not a story about superiority. It is a story about responsibility, about why your path became narrower, quieter, and heavier, why you had to walk alone when others walked together, and why all of it had meaning long before you were able to see it. If you feel that you were set apart, this story is speaking to you. You have always felt it, even before you had words for it. A subtle difference, a quiet tension between you and the world, as if life spoke one language to everyone else and another, stranger, deeper, heavier to you alone. You tried to ignore it once. You tried to blend in, to flatten yourself to the rhythm of the crowd, to laugh where others laughed and want what they wanted. But something in you resisted. Not loudly, not rebelliously, just enough to make you feel out of place. This is where your story truly begins. Not on a mountain, not in a temple, not with thunder or fire, but in that persistent feeling that you were not made for sameness. That feeling was not arrogance, it was not imagination, and it was not loneliness by accident. It was a mark, quiet, invisible, but intentional. God does not separate without purpose. From the very beginning, separation has been His language. Light from darkness, land from sea, silence from sound. Calling does not emerge from chaos. It emerges from distinction. And long before you questioned yourself, long before others misunderstood you, that distinction had already been placed upon you. You were set apart before you were aware of it. That is why your path has never looked ordinary. Why comfort never held you for long. Why ease felt suspicious and success, when it came too easily, felt hollow. God was not punishing you. He was protecting the shape of what He put inside you. A vessel meant for weight cannot be treated like a cup meant for decoration. You may have asked, why me? But heaven asked a different question. Who else could carry this? Look back, not with regret, but with clarity. The moments when you felt isolated even in rooms full of people. The seasons when friendships dissolved without explanation. The times when opportunities slipped through your fingers just as you reached for them. You thought you were being delayed. You thought you were being denied. But what if you were being preserved? God often removes what would dilute you before He reveals what will define you. He distances you from noise so you can hear instruction. He strips you of imitation so originality can survive. He allows misunderstanding so approval does not become your master. If everyone had understood you, you might have belonged to them instead of to Him. This is the part few talk about. Being chosen rarely feels like being celebrated. More often, it feels like being misplaced, like being too intense for shallow conversations, too thoughtful for quick answers, too honest for comfortable lies. You noticed patterns others ignored. You asked questions others avoided. You felt pain that others numbed, and because of that, you learned early how to stand alone, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. God sets apart those He intends to use as bridges, between pain and healing, between truth and confusion, between what is and what could be. Bridges are stepped on. They are not thanked. They are not admired for their beauty. But without them, no one crosses. You were never meant to be the destination. You were meant to be the passage. That is why your heart has always been sensitive. Why injustice unsettles you. Why suffering you did not cause still weighs on you. God entrusted you with sight because He knew you would not look away. And sight is expensive. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you know, you cannot unknow. So he separated you early. While others were learning how to fit in, you were learning how to endure. While others were building comfort, you were building depth. While others were collecting answers, you were collecting scars, each one shaping your discernment, each one teaching you what shallow joy cannot. You may think your life has been harder than it needed to be, but hardness is not cruelty when it refines instead of breaks. Gold is not offended by fire, it is revealed by it. God allowed pressure not to crush you, but to expose what was real. False identities cannot survive sustained weight. Pretenses collapse under silence. Only what is rooted in truth remains. That is why, even when you were exhausted, something in you stayed standing. You bent, you doubted, you wept, but you did not disappear. There is a reason you are still here. The world teaches sameness because sameness is easy to manage. God teaches uniqueness because uniqueness carries assignment. And assignment requires distance, from distractions, from borrowed dreams, from lives that look good but feel empty. You were separated not because you are better, but because you are needed. Needed to listen when others shout. Needed to stay when others run. Needed to carry meaning in places that worship speed. This is why your timing has always felt strange, why your breakthroughs come late but land deep, why your joy is quieter but truer. God is not interested in giving you what impresses people. He is interested in forming you into someone who can steward what lasts. If he had rushed you, he would have risked losing you. So he slowed you down. And in the stillness, he spoke. Not always in words, but in direction. Closed doors, interrupted plans, sudden endings that made no sense until years later. You thought God was absent. In truth, he was editing. Every separation was a sentence rewritten. Every loss was a line removed. Every delay was a pause for emphasis. Your life is not a mistake that eventually finds meaning. It is a meaning that requires patience to read. You were set apart because your voice would one day carry weight, and weight requires silence beforehand. Noise cheapens truth. God guarded your message by guarding your environment, even when you resisted it, even when you begged for normal. Normal would have cost you your depth. So if you are wondering now why you feel different, why you cannot settle, why you sense there is more but cannot yet touch it, this is your answer. You were marked before you were ready, separated before you were confident, prepared before you were informed. God did not explain himself to you because explanation would have invited fear. Instead, he invited trust. And trust is built not through clarity, but through survival. You survived what should have hardened you. You remained soft where others became sharp. You kept faith when logic failed. That is not an accident. That is training. This is only the beginning of understanding why you were set apart. The story does not move forward with applause. It moves forward with alignment. And alignment always begins with recognition. Now you know this much. Your difference is not a flaw. Your loneliness was not wasted. Your delays were not denials. They were the opening lines of a calling that cannot be rushed. Once you recognize that you were set apart, something shifts inside you. Not relief, at least not yet, but gravity. Understanding brings weight. You begin to see your life not as a series of random events, but as a deliberate construction. And that realization is unsettling because it removes one comforting illusion, that your struggles were meaningless. They were not. Awareness is often the heaviest burden God gives first, before strength, before clarity, before peace. Because awareness changes how you move through the world. You can no longer drift. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer numb yourself without consequence. This is why, after recognition, rest rarely comes immediately. You start noticing how deeply you feel things. Words linger longer in you than in others. Atmospheres affect you. Silence speaks. You read between lines instinctively, sensing motives, wounds, truths people themselves cannot articulate. You try to explain this to others, but language fails. They hear what you say, not what you perceive. And so, again, you feel separate. God gives awareness to those he trusts with responsibility. Because awareness is not a gift for comfort. It is a tool for discernment. To see clearly in a blurred world is not pleasant. It means you are exposed to contradictions others live inside of peacefully. You see hypocrisy where others see normality. You sense danger where others sense excitement. You feel emptiness in places others call success. And that makes you inconvenient. You begin to realize that fitting in would require you to lie, to yourself first, and then to everyone else. So you hesitate, you pull back, you observe. Some call you distant, some call you cold, some say you overthink. But the truth is simpler. You are awake. Awake people cannot live shallow lives. God separated you because your awareness would have suffocated in an environment built on distraction. You were never meant to survive on noise. Your soul requires meaning the way lungs require air. Without it, you ache. Without it, you wander. Without it, you grow restless in ways sleep cannot fix. This is why escapism never worked for you for long. Temporary pleasures left you emptier than before. Achievement without purpose tasted bland. Relationships without depth drained you. You tried to adopt the world's coping mechanisms, but they did not fit your design. They dulled others. They wounded you. Because what numbs the surface often poisons the deep. God did not allow you to remain unaware because unawareness would have made you manageable, but also forgettable. And you were not created to be forgotten. You were created to remember, to carry truths others lose, to hold memory where others discard it. That is why nostalgia hits you harder, why past moments revisit you with intensity, why you replay conversations, decisions, crossroads. It is not weakness, it is integration. You are wired to extract meaning from experience, not just survive it. But awareness is lonely. You look around and realize how few people are willing to sit with discomfort long enough to understand it. Most prefer speed over depth, certainty over truth, distraction over healing. And you, without choosing it, became allergic to pretending. God knew this would isolate you. He knew awareness would make casual friendships difficult, that it would make small talk exhausting, that it would place you in the strange position of being surrounded, yet unseen. But he also knew something else. Awareness is the foundation of wisdom, and wisdom requires time alone. Before God uses a person publicly, he often teaches them privately, in the quiet, in confusion, in unanswered questions. You thought you were being ignored, but you were being educated, not through lectures, but through lived experience. Pain became a language you understood fluently. Loss became a teacher. Waiting became familiar. You learned how to sit with unanswered prayers without abandoning faith. That alone sets you apart. Many believe until belief costs them comfort. You believed while it cost you certainty. That kind of belief changes you. You stopped asking for easy answers. You stopped demanding explanations. Instead, you started listening for patterns, for direction, for resonance. You learned to trust alignment over logic, peace over applause, depth over speed. And slowly, without realizing it, you became discerning. Discerning people are dangerous, not to others, but to systems built on illusion. They cannot be manipulated easily. They do not chase every opportunity. They sense when something is misaligned, even if it looks good on the surface. That is why the world often sidelines them, but God does not. He sets them aside until the right moment. You may have noticed how often your life felt like preparation without context, skills developed without application, insights gained without outlet, strength built without immediate use. That frustration was intentional. God was teaching you to carry capacity without entitlement. Because entitlement ruins calling. If he had revealed everything too early, you might have tried to control it, to market it, to rush it. Instead, he taught you restraint, to hold potential without demanding recognition, to know your worth without proving it. That is rare. This awareness also made you more compassionate. You see behind behaviors. You recognize pain disguised as arrogance, fear masked as anger, emptiness hidden behind charm. You do not excuse harm, but you understand its origin, and understanding tempers judgment. That is why you struggle to hate fully. Even when wronged, something in you looks for meaning instead of revenge. That does not make you weak. It makes you trustworthy. God entrusts awareness to those who will not weaponize it. Still, there are days you wish you could turn it off. Days you envy simplicity. Days you wish you could want what everyone else wants without questioning it. Days you wish ignorance felt safe. But it doesn't. Not anymore. Once God opens your eyes, he does not close them again. Because what he plans to do through you requires vision, not ambition, not charisma. Vision, the ability to see what others miss and to act without needing immediate validation. Your awareness is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to guide you. But first, it had to mature. Untamed awareness becomes anxiety. Refined awareness becomes wisdom. That refinement takes time. So if you feel heavy lately, not sad, not hopeless, just aware, this is not a sign you are failing. It is a sign you are transitioning from confusion to clarity, from reaction to intention, from survival to alignment. God is not increasing your burden, he is increasing your capacity. And capacity always feels like pressure before it feels like purpose. There comes a point when awareness is no longer the hardest part. Isolation is. Not the dramatic kind, not abandonment or rejection in obvious forms, but the slow, quiet narrowing of your world. Fewer people call. Fewer invitations feel right to accept. Conversations feel repetitive, even when they are friendly. You begin to crave solitude, not because you hate people, but because too much interaction dilutes you. This is not depression. This is discipline. God isolates those he is reshaping. Isolation is often misunderstood because the world frames it as punishment. But in the language of God, isolation is concentration. When something matters deeply, it is removed from interference. When something is fragile during transformation, it is protected from touch. Seeds grow underground for a reason. You did not drift into isolation by accident. You were guided into it by exhaustion, by disappointment, by an unexplainable inner resistance to continuing life as usual. God did not force you away from people. He allowed you to outgrow certain environments until staying felt dishonest. You began choosing quiet not because it was easy, but because it was honest. Isolation stripped away roles you played unconsciously. The version of yourself that adapted too much. The one that over-explained. The one that smiled through discomfort to keep peace. Without an audience, those versions lost relevance. And what remained was unfamiliar, but real. This is where God starts doing his deepest work. In isolation, there is no one to impress, no one to convince, no one to distract you from yourself. Your thoughts become louder, your patterns become visible, your unresolved questions surface without mercy. You can no longer outrun what lives inside you, and that confrontation is necessary. God does not build on avoidance, he builds on truth. Isolation removes the emotional noise that allows self-deception to survive. You begin noticing how you cope, where you numb, where you control, where you hide. Not to shame you, but to heal you. Healing requires honesty. Honesty requires space. This is also where your relationship with God changes. It becomes less transactional and more relational. You stop praying only for outcomes and start praying for understanding. You stop asking when and start asking, why am I becoming this? Silence becomes less threatening. Stillness becomes instructive. You realize how much of your previous faith depended on external reinforcement, community, momentum, affirmation. When those are removed, faith either collapses or deepens. Yours deepened, slowly, unevenly, but genuinely. You learned how to believe without witnesses. That alone separates you from many. Isolation teaches self-governance. Without constant feedback, you learn to regulate your emotions instead of outsourcing them. You learn when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent. These are not small skills. They are leadership traits forged in privacy. God often trains leaders where no one is watching. You may have felt forgotten during this time, like life was moving forward for everyone else while yours paused. Weddings, promotions, new beginnings, while you remained in a holding pattern, unsure if you were falling behind or being held back. But isolation is not stagnation. It is incubation. What grows in isolation grows strong enough to survive exposure later. God was strengthening your internal structures, your values, your boundaries, your discernment, so that when visibility comes, you do not fracture under pressure. Many fail publicly because they were never refined privately. You were. Isolation also clarified your desires. Not what sounded impressive, not what earned applause, but what resonated deeply. You discovered that you do not want everything, only what aligns. And alignment matters more to you than acceleration. That is wisdom. You became selective with your energy, protective of your time, careful with your words. Not because you are closed, but because you understand the cost of access. Not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone can steward your vulnerability responsibly. God taught you this, not through theory, but through experience. Betrayals, disappointments, misplaced trust, each one refined your discernment. Each one narrowed your circle. Each one hurt, but also sharpened you. You learned that closeness without safety is dangerous. And you learned how to recognize safety without guarantees. Isolation trains intuition. You also learned how to sit with yourself without entertainment, without validation, without distraction. That terrified you at first. But over time, you noticed something unexpected. Peace began to emerge. Not constant, not perfect, but real. A peace not dependent on circumstances. That peace is rare. It means you stopped outsourcing your sense of self. You no longer needed constant reflection from others to know who you were. You became internally anchored. That is not loneliness. That is independence of identity. God was preparing you for influence without dependency. Because dependency corrupts purpose. Isolation also dismantled your urgency. You stopped chasing timelines. You stopped comparing progress. You stopped measuring success by visibility. You learned that readiness matters more than speed, that depth matters more than reach. You learned how to wait without rotting. That is not passive. That is disciplined restraint. You may not have noticed it, but your standards changed. You became less tolerant of misalignment, less willing to compromise your values for convenience, less impressed by surface-level charisma, more drawn to integrity, even when it is quiet. Isolation purified your taste. God often isolates those whose standards he intends to raise. You cannot develop clarity while constantly negotiating your boundaries. So he removed the negotiation. You were not abandoned. You were being stabilized. And now, something else is happening. The isolation that once felt heavy is beginning to feel complete. Not because you are suddenly surrounded, but Because you are no longer empty. You have something solid inside you now, something formed, something coherent. Isolation has done its work. You are no longer afraid of being alone, but you are also no longer meant to stay there. God never isolates permanently. He isolates purposefully. And when the purpose is fulfilled, reintroduction begins. But not to the same life, not to the same dynamics, not to the same version of you. You will return with boundaries, with discernment, with depth, with restraint, with clarity. And that will confuse people who remember the old you. Let them be confused. You were not isolated to be understood. You were isolated to be prepared. At some point, the question changes. It is no longer, why was I set apart? It becomes, what am I meant to do with this? This is where everything you endured begins to align, not into a neat explanation, but into a quiet certainty. You may not receive a dramatic revelation. No lightning, no voice from the sky. Instead, the assignment reveals itself through resonance, through what pulls at you repeatedly, through what you cannot ignore without feeling diminished. Calling is not always discovered. Often, it is remembered. You realize that the very things that isolated you are the things people now seek from you. Your patience, your depth, your ability to listen without rushing to fix, your discernment, your steadiness under pressure. You thought these traits made you odd. God was shaping them into instruments. You were not set apart to be admired. You were set apart to serve in a way few can. This is the final and hardest truth. Being chosen is not about elevation. It is about responsibility. God does not reveal assignment to reward you. He reveals it to entrust you. And what He entrusts to you will often require sacrifice long after others think your struggle should be over. Purpose is heavier than pain. You begin to see that your life is meant to intersect with others at critical moments. Not to save them, that is not your role, but to stand with them when they cannot stand alone. To speak truth without crushing. To bring clarity without arrogance. To hold space without controlling outcomes. Your assignment is not loud, but it is precise. You are meant to bring order where there is confusion, calm where there is chaos, depth where there is superficiality, integrity where there is compromise. These are not glamorous tasks. They do not trend. They are rarely celebrated, but they are essential. God assigns few to this kind of work because it requires restraint more than ambition, presence more than performance, faithfulness more than visibility. You were trained for this in isolation. Awareness sharpened your perception. Discipline stabilized your character. Misunderstanding detached you from approval. Now you are free enough to be useful. This does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. In some ways, it becomes more demanding. You are now accountable not just for what you avoid, but for what you withhold. There will be moments when you want to retreat again, to hide your insight, to stay silent when speaking would cost you comfort. But silence, when meant to speak, becomes disobedience. God does not rush you into your assignment. He invites you into it, again and again, through nudges, through unrest when you avoid it, through peace when you align with it. You will feel it most clearly when you stop asking how it will look and start asking who it will help. Calling clarifies when ego quiets. You may still doubt yourself. That does not disqualify you. Doubt keeps you dependent. What disqualifies people is certainty without humility. You are preserved from that through struggle, through waiting, through unanswered prayers. Your authority will never come from confidence alone. It will come from compassion forged in pain. You will recognize your assignment not by excitement, but by weight, by the sense that this matters even when it exhausts you, even when it goes unseen, even when gratitude is absent. Purpose does not always energize, it anchors. And anchoring others requires you to be anchored yourself. That is why God delayed you, why He isolated you, why He misunderstood you. He was not testing your endurance. He was building your capacity. Capacity to carry stories without exploiting them. Capacity to lead without dominating. Capacity to influence without losing yourself. You were never meant to replicate someone else's path. Your assignment cannot be copied because it flows from who you are, not what you do. It will express itself differently across seasons, but the core will remain the same. You are meant to bring alignment where things drift. This is why your conscience is sensitive, why compromise unsettles you, why half-truths feel heavy. God entrusted you with an internal compass, not to judge others, but to navigate faithfully. And navigation is only needed when terrain is difficult. Do not expect universal support. Chosen paths are rarely crowded. Some will misunderstand your motives. Some will project their fear onto your restraint. Some will benefit from your steadiness without acknowledging its cost. That is part of the assignment, too. You are not responsible for how your obedience is received, only for whether it is given. God does not ask you to convince. He asks you to be consistent. Impact will follow integrity, even if recognition does not. And here is the final truth you must accept. Being set apart is not something you graduate from. It is something you steward. There will be seasons of closeness and seasons of distance, seasons of clarity and seasons of silence, seasons where your assignment is obvious and seasons where it feels dormant. Do not panic during the quiet. Dormancy is not absence. It is preservation between uses. God does not discard what He refines. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are exactly where someone like you needs to be to do the work you were shaped for. So walk forward, not loudly, not apologetically, but faithfully. Let your life speak where words fail. Let your steadiness be your testimony. Let your depth be your offering. You were set apart not to escape the world, but to serve it without becoming it. That is the assignment.